Okay, so we are starting a new unit. We just finished up with several weeks of solving equations, and that information is going to come in very handy in this upcoming unit of linear equations. So the name of the whole unit that we're going to be doing here is, this is what you want to put in your notes, linear equations. And then specifically today, we're going to be talking about slope intercept form. So put that in your notes. And just as a recap for everybody at home, because we just kind of talked about that in class doing our jump start, is that when you have a coordinate plane, this is your x-axis and this is your y-axis. And then if we graph a line anywhere along that coordinate plane, okay, there are a bunch of, let me see if I can get a different color. Can I get a different color going? No, it looks like I'm, there we go. All right, so along this line, there are countless, I mean, there's too many to count, but there are points all along this line, an infinite number of points. And each one of these points has an x and a y coordinate. So when you are talking about a linear equation, the linear equation has to have an x and a y in it. It has to, okay? Now, I say that we've talked about in this class before, horizontal lines and vertical lines. Horizontal lines go side to side, and they only have a y, so they'll say like y equals 2. And vertical lines go up and down, and they only have an x. So there are a couple of special cases, but if there is any slant or any diagonal slant to a line whatsoever, it's going to have an x and a y. And so the form that we're going to look at the most in this next week or so, it's called slope intercept form, and it is y equals, I like to color code these because we're going to talk about what everything means, mx plus b. Okay? Now, the m, does anybody remember what the m represents in y equals mx plus b? And it doesn't start with an m, so it's kind of weird. Does anybody know what that stands for, or what that means, or what that represents? That is the slope. And remember from earlier in the year, slope is rise over run. Okay? Rise over run. You guys should be writing this down in your notes. So the m in y equals mx plus b, the m is always the number that's attached to the x, and it can be a fraction because that's okay, rise over run, right? We need a fraction, we need a top number and a bottom number. And then does anybody remember what the b stands for? Nobody? All right, the b is the y-intercept. The y-intercept. So again, right, this is your y-axis right here, the up and down axis. So where your line intersects the y-intercept is considered the y-intercept, or the b, okay? So in the little example graph I have, if I were to ask you what the y-intercept is, right, from here, the y-intercept, what's the x value of every y-intercept? 0, okay, because it doesn't go left or right at all. And then in this, we'll just call that -2. So the y-intercept here would be -2, right? Because this line intercepts the y-axis at -2. So if you are taking our jump start, for example, and our jump start was, I'm glad you have it on the board, Gabby, that helps me, 2x plus 3y equals 6. If I were to ask you to put this, which is what our jump start was, right? It was solve for y. And another way you could, the other instructions you could be given that would mean the same thing would be to put into slope intercept form. This right here and this right here, number 1 and number 2, they mean the exact same thing. Solve for y means get it in y equals mx plus b. Put it in slope-intercept form means the same thing. It means put it in y equals mx plus b. So if you're given instructions on a jump start or on a homework assignment or on a quiz and it just says solve for y, you know it means y equals mx plus b. If it says put in slope-intercept form, y equals mx plus b. So for our jump start today, right, we subtracted 2x and we subtracted 2x. And then we got 3y equals, and then order matters. And so since mx comes before the b, my negative 2x is going to come first. And then my plus 6 is going to be written second, because you always want to write your x value before the plain number. And then we want to keep getting y by itself. So we're going to divide each term individually by 3. And we get y equals negative 2/3 x. And the negative or positive 6 divided by positive 3 is positive 2. So in this equation, if I were to ask you, what does m equal? What would you tell me? Jalen, what do you think m equals in the jump start, or the one, it's the same problem that I have up on the board. If you think about y equals mx plus b, looking at this y equals negative 2/3 x plus 2, what's in the m spot? Yeah, negative 2/3. And then if I were to ask you the y-intercept or the b, you would put b equals, Bryce, what do you think b equals? Thinking about y equals mx plus b, b's that last number, so in our equation up there, what's b equal? Look at the blank equation here, y equals mx plus b. Yeah, plus 2. So if I were to ask you, just looking at our jump start, 2x plus 3y equals 6, and I said, what's the slope and what's the y-intercept? You would have to put it in slope-intercept form, and then you would have to figure out what's in the m spot and what's in the b spot. And we'll do a couple of these. All right, so let's do another one. So if we have 5x, go ahead and put this in your notes, minus 3y equals 12. Okay, 5x minus 3y equals 12. And the instructions say put into, and I'm just going to abbreviate here, slope-intercept form, and, because you're going to see this on assignments, and identify the slope and the y-intercept. Okay, that's what we're doing here. We're going to put it in slope-intercept form, and we're going to identify the slope, and we're going to identify the y-intercept. Okay? And of course, once we get it in our slope-intercept form, identifying the slope and the intercept are pretty easy if you can remember where everything goes. All right, so Gabby, what would be our first step here in getting this in slope-intercept form? Yeah, the 5x, the whole thing. We're going to subtract the 5x, because the 5 and the x right now are multiplied together, so they are really, they're tied pretty tight together. So where one goes, the other goes, okay? I always kind of do the memory trick of marriage, or multiply is like marriage. Once you get married, you're one. So when you're moving the 5 and the x, they move together because they're married together right now until we divide them off. All right, so I've moved that to the other side, so I'm left with negative 3y equals, which one am I going to write first, the 12 or the negative 5x? Yes, we're going to write the negative 5x first because we always want that x value written first. All right, Corbin, what's next? Yeah. Yep. All three terms individually. Remember, if you stop for snacks on a road trip, if you get candy for one kid, you got to get candy for all the kids. So we give everybody their own negative 3 divided by negative 3. All right, so we get y equals, now negative 5 divided by negative 3 turns positive because two negatives turn positive. The x just stays the x. And then positive 12 divided by negative 3 is negative 4. So now the last half of our instructions said identify the slope. What letter do we use to represent slope? M. So what does the m equal here? Good, 5 over 3. What letter do we use to represent the y-intercept? B, and what's our b equal? Negative 4. Perfect. So these aren't bad. These really aren't. If you, and you all did, you all did amazing on the whole solving equations unit. So if you're good at moving things left and right and then dividing off that number, if you can do that, you can put anything in slope intercept form, okay? Because it's just remembering the order that everything goes in. All right, let's do one more. Let's see. No, let me make that 15y. There we go, sorry. 10x plus 15y equals 20. And again, we're going to do the same instructions. We're going to solve for y, and then we want to identify the m, and we want to identify the b at some point, okay? Now, I can't identify the m and the b until I get it in y equals mx plus b. So, Bryce, what's our first step here of getting this in y equals mx plus b? Yep, subtract. Good. Subtract 10x from both sides, and when I do, I get 15y equals, which one am I going to write first? The negative 10x, so minus 10x, and then plus 20, because that 20 is a positive. Okay. Corbin, what would I do next? All the way across, right? All three get it. That leaves me y equals, now a negative over a positive is negative 10 over 15, and then x, and then 20 over 15. I should have made that a 30. That's okay. Just so it would have come out even, but that's all right. 20 over 15. Now, what would I want to do here? I've divided everything by 15, but you don't want to leave it like this. Corbin? Yeah, let's simplify those fractions. Because they're all reducible by 5, let's go ahead and write it in its simplest form. So negative 10 and 15 can reduce, if I divide them both by 5, I get negative 2 over 3. And then if I reduce 20 and 15 both by 5, I would get plus 4 over 3. And really where that comes into play is when you're graphing these, that negative 10 over 15. So if you guys remember, slope is rise over run. So if we rise 15 or rise 10 and run 15, that's a whole lot of counting, right? That's a whole lot of up and a whole lot of over. And sometimes your graph may not big enough. Your graph may not be big enough, like what you have on your paper may not be big enough to rise 10 and run 15. So you have to remember to simplify those because it's a whole lot easier to rise 2 and run 3, right? Counting and space-wise. All right, so now what's my m here? Good, negative 2/3 is my m, and what's my b? 4 over 3. Good. So I've put it in y equals mx plus b right here, and then I identified the m and the b right here. And the instructions, I think the way it says it on the homework assignment, it'll say state the slope and state the y-intercept instead of identify, which is fine. They mean the same thing. It just means put m equals and b equals. Okay? Any question on these? All right, what I want to do is together work through something here. Let me flip over to my internet. And we want, flip this over so I can actually type in. It'll be a whole lot easier. Slope and y-intercept from an equation. So what this means is, and we're not going to watch the video because he's going to go through everything that we just went through, but we're going to go, let's see, slope intercept form. Let's do this one. So we're going to just work through this together. All right, so it says, what, can you guys see that? Let's see if I can make it bigger. There we go. It says, what is the slope of y equals 5x minus 1? So what's the slope equal here? Let's see. Jalen, what's the slope? Not the x, just the 5. Okay, so the slope is just the m in front of the x. Or would you say behind? I guess behind the x. So the 5 is what's attached to the x. So just the 5 is the slope. Okay, now technically its slope is rise over run. So if you needed it as a fraction, how could you write it? 5 over 1. So you don't need to write it as a fraction here, but just know that if you ever need to graph, well, we will need to graph it. That's what we're going to be doing tomorrow. When you graph this, it's 5 over 1 because you need a rise and a run. You always have to have a fraction for your slope, okay? All right, so it should tell us, yay, good job. It did, good work. So next question. There's 4 of them and there's 4 of you, so that works out perfect. So Bryce, I'm going to give you this one. This says, what is the y-intercept of y equals negative 3x minus 2? So first you have to think, where's the y-intercept in the equation y equals negative 3x minus 2? Okay, negative 2. Now, it wants the ordered pair. So which one of these would be the ordered pair for the y-intercept? It's got the right numbers in it, but remember that let me see if I can... Yeah, remember that your point is x, y, and you've identified that the y value, the y-intercept is negative 2. So what's the x value of every intercept, every y-intercept? 0. So then which one would it be? Yeah, so you had the right numbers, but in this one right here, the negative 2 is the x spot and the 0 is the y spot, and you just need, since it's the y spot, you want the negative 2 to be in the y spot. All right, so we're going to select D, and then we're going to hit enter. There we go, check. And that's right. All right, Gabby, this one's yours. Ooh, this one's a tricky one. Oh, it won't let me make it bigger. There we go. Y equals negative 3x, and it wants to know what's the y-intercept. This is a trick one. That's okay. We'll talk through it. Yeah. So think of y equals mx plus b, right? And which one of those is the y-intercept? Mx plus b. What's the y-intercept? The b. Well, here you've got y equals negative 3x, but what's the plus b? Now, if we stuck a 1 there, it would change it, but what could we stick there that wouldn't change it? Yeah. So if there's nothing there, you can actually put a 0 there, and it doesn't change it doesn't change the value of the equation. So now, what's the coordinates of the y-intercept? That would be that would make this a negative 3 right here, because the c has a negative 3 in the y spot. Let's keep talking through it. What if we're talking y-intercept? What do we know goes in the x spot? And then what did we determine is our y-intercept? So what's our point? Yeah. Sorry, Gabby, you got the hard one. I didn't mean for it to happen, but you did. You did good, though. All right. And Corbin, I think you're it, right? Okay. Complete the equation. Oh, we haven't done one like this yet, so we may not do this one. Complete the equation of a line whose y-intercept. Yeah, you can do this one. I got faith in you. All right. I think you know enough. All right. So complete the equation, and it gives you, so for y-intercept, instead of putting y-intercept as 0, 5, what could I write underneath that just to give myself some clues? What's y-intercept? What's the letter that stands for y-intercept? B equals what? 5. And what do we know instead of slope? What could we write? Nope. Okay. So if we know the m and we know the b, we have enough to write the equation, right? So we write y equals, now what? Negative 9. What always goes with the negative 9? X. And then what do we write? Excellent. Good. So now keep in mind when you're doing a Khan Academy, and I have people miss it because of this, look what they already give you. So all you have to write in is, you got that, Gabby? Did you see what I just pointed out? Or were you looking down drawing? Yeah. If Khan Academy puts y equals right here, then you don't have to put the y equals again. It'll count it wrong if you do it. Okay? All right. So it should say, yay, you got it right. We did. Show summary. Good job. 4 out of 4. All right. No homework for tonight. We are going to, tomorrow we're going to review this, and then we're going to talk about how to graph in y equals mx plus b. And then on Wednesday, which is an E-Day, we'll have some Edpuzzle and or Khan Academy to practice this. And then on Thursday and Friday, we'll review it, maybe have a short little quiz on Friday, and then we'll move on to other linear equations next week. Okay? We'll keep it pretty simple and pretty easy this week. All right. Thank you much. For those of you at home, thanks for watching the video, taking notes. There is no homework assignment today, but you will need what you learned today in order to complete tomorrow and Wednesday's assignments. As always, email me if you need anything.